Hello, Gary.
Hello, guys. Today we have Fatboy Slim.
Boy Slim. Yeah, well, it says, of course, well, me being, well, actually, now I'm I guess, Brighton native. Of course, he's one of our big local stars.
Yeah, well, you were in Brighton in 2002 when he put 250,000 people down on the promenade on the beach.
No, I didn't. But I wish I did, because that was an amazing thing, was it? Because apparently, because the crowd had to sort of crush and ease out according to the tide.
Fantastic. But, you know, in a way, I mean, probably the greatest attack of a British beach since Rods and Rockers in the 60s.
Yes, exactly, yes.
I have to hold my hand up here and say, obviously, you know, Norman, the two Housemartins albums from the 80s, which he was on, and, you know, with Paul Heaton, and we'll discuss those. And then we'll move into his big beats and all of the dance music he's done. But I have to hold my hand up and say, it was never it. Normally I can draw the dots between all of music, and I'm gonna be learning on my feet in this one, really.
No, it's fair enough. But no, but what's nice is you got to remember the thing in the 90s was that everyone was across everything in that scene for Brit, but you know that everyone was doing dance mixes of everyone. As someone once said, the kind of thing with the Britpop years was suddenly like dance and indie all came together. They were all wearing the same trainers.
Well, yeah,
and bucket hats.
I do feel it was a period when, you know, there was a time when clothes were everything, right? And then it suddenly became the clothes were there just to help you with the drugs, you know, and the sweat and the rain and whatever it might be that you're, you know.
Yeah, it was everyone wore Moog t-shirts, didn't they?
Moog.
Moog is the hill I will die on, even though I know I'm wrong.
I'm always Moog. Yeah.
Anyway, but this is good. It will be a great chat. So
no, it will be, because I've got a lot of stuff that I'm interested in. Oh, someone's waving. I think he's here.
Let's get him on.
Welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning. Yay, Norman.
Oh, man.
You're doing? We're very well. How are you doing?
Just wrestling with technology.
Yeah, you're looking very serious and studious. This is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I have a serious and studious side. No, I just not.
How can you be wrestling with technology? I mean, you bust the envelope open.
I know, everyone thinks I should be really good at electronics. I don't know why. It's one of those. I'm trying to get the headphone to work.
We'll give you a few minutes.
This is brilliant. For those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, just say we've got Norman Cook here. We've got a DJ, one of the top DJs in the world, trying to figure out how a pair of headphones works.
Yeah.
Good morning, Norman.
Good morning.
So you're just down the road from each other. It's literally, you're just down the road from each other.
No, well, I'm in London at the moment.
Oh, you're in London. Of course you are, because you're doing the Albert.
Because I'm doing my Albert Hall residency.
Yeah.
Are you in Hove, Norm?
Well, we generally are neighbours, and it's bizarre because we met the other night at a restaurant opening.
We did.
Just amazed that our paths haven't crossed more, but then you reminded me that our paths had crossed before, and I just didn't remember.
That's right. Well, a funny place, Coachella was once, yeah, and a wedding, and a rather glamorous wedding we ended up.
Yeah, both of which involved large amounts of alcohol on my part.
No, the second one didn't actually. I think you'd stopped, but I'm trying to remember if that was because that was you were DJing at Coachella. I was playing with Brian Ferry. I actually got left in the middle of the desert in the middle of the night. One. Yeah, when they drove off and left me. Yeah, one of those.
Alex James's wedding, I'm pretty sure I was quite drunk.
No, we were both absolutely.
Oh right, yeah. And I was definitely drunk at Coachella because it took us like 6 hours to get there, and we just had an enormous bottle of vodka in the back of the car on the way there, and consequently, I don't remember much about being at Coachella that time at all.
Oh, because at the hotel I saw you.
You're teetotal now, Norman, right?
I'm 15 years sober. Yeah.
Congratulations,
good lad.
For this exact reason.
Yeah, mate, hands up, same here.
I mean, is it? Come on, this is like what your gig, right, Norm, is famously the most sort of drug-inspired event. You know, all those raves, you know, ecstasy was such a big thing, and how was that for you? Because it's very different from, say, like just stopping, you know, drink to play guitar, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite. I mean, one of the things that held me back from stopping drinking was how will I do my job sober? because it just never happened before. And you're right, you're kind of, I considered it unprofessional not to be on the same level as my audience when you're trying to, you know, tap into their vibe. But, you know, it's really hard. The first few shows I did, I was just absolutely paralyzed with every kind of stage fright. You know, all those things about, you know, your legs turning to jelly and weak in the knees, like oh my God, that actually physically does happen. And it took a while just to have a different mindset and way I do it. But I mean, one of the things is I get so overexcited when I'm DJing that I'm sort of intoxicated by the moment and the music and the excitement of it all. And there's a lot of my when you see me DJing on YouTubes and things like that, if you scroll down the comments, there's always a load of people who go, I thought Norman was supposed to be sober. Look at him, he's completely off his nut. And you know, discussing what I may or may have not had. But no, I just get in the moment, and that works for me. It's great because when the moment finishes, I go to bed and go back to being a responsible father of two.
But that's exactly what, that's an interesting, you know, as a sober person myself, that's what the extraordinary thing is. All that stuff that you think is drink and drugs actually isn't. So much of it is just the energy of what you're doing, you know, and you actually thought of that. And but you also just finished off with what I love. The favorite part of it is that now the gig is the end of the day rather than the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, the gig, it was the beginning of the really naughty and stupid bit. Yeah. Which is probably what I was doing with you in the hotel.
Just explain to a lot of our listeners, because this is, you know, I suppose we are what it says on the tin. It's Rockonteurs, you know, and we have a lot of guitar and rock and pop oriented people on. And the DJ now, you're not just playing records, are you? Because I mean, we'll talk later about how you create those pieces of music, incredible pieces of music, and the collage effect. But when you're up there, what are you doing?
Trying to create the soundtrack for everybody else's night out. It's trying to, I mean, dance music's always been really good for bringing people together, that sort of sense of community shared round the rave, but also a sense of escape. So you're trying to create this sort of wonderland where everybody's free from the shackles of your job or your normal life, and everybody looks sexy, and you know it kind of engendered this. So I'm just trying to think of the soundtrack of how you allow people to commune through music, but also to lose themselves in that. And it's quite a nebulous sort of instinct. But a lot of it comes from 30 years of being there in the moment of the party and kind of knowing how it's all about triggering emotions and feels through music, which I suppose is the same as every musician does, but there you're kind of in total control and you can change it. Unlike a band where you rehearse a set and then you play the set, and it's a lot of it's very off the cuff, and you just look out and you think, oh, they want to go harder or higher, or you know. Yeah. And it's very much a communicative thing. I look at we don't say anything to each other, but through our eyes and our actions, we communicate. And yeah,
that makes complete sense. But it's literally, I mean, this is literally the absolute epitome of reading the room, right? But what gets me, especially now with this sheer amount of music that you know and have made and have access to, when you look at them and you go, oh yeah, they want to go sort of here. Yeah, 10,000 records you can go to. How, you know, or do you just have like 5? You know,
that's the thing. I mean, both of you two must have been on stage at certain points and thought, Christ, we need to pick things up a little here. You know, like, and do I need to do this enough to tell the rest of the band, come on, let's go to, you know, let's jump onto a different track. Yeah. I'm kind of doing that every track, but also I don't have to account to the rest of the band to tell them what I'm going to do next. So there's that flexibility. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the mechanics of it, I have the thousands of records, but I distill them down to about 60 or 80 that I think I'm going to play that night. I always, when I arrive at the venue, I always go and have a look at sniff the crowd, I call it. And I just go and look at the sort of the age, the mood and the drug intake of the crowd, and what the DJ before is doing and where it's at. And then sometimes I'll tweak it and go, all right, okay, it's that kind of night, or they're that old. And yeah, so you separate that down to a crate, which is your kind of what you think you'll play. So I'll have like 80 tunes in the crate, of which I'll play about 40 during the show.
And are they all on computer? They're not. They're on hard drive, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you do it on. A lot of DJs do it on USB, but I use a program called Serato, which is like a dedicated DJ program, and it's easy for me because I can see I've got a little laptop, and the laptop's a lot easier to read than a CDJ. CDJ, you only get a little LED display about that big. And at my age, I'd have to wear reading glasses to squint at it. The laptop has got big writing, and it's at an appropriate distance that I can read it without wearing glasses.
I mean, I guess there are moments when you have to play Fatboy Slim tracks, or you know, one of your own, whatever it might be, and they are key moments. But apart from that, you're curating, aren't you?
I mean, that's the one thing that the algorithms and technology and hopefully AI can't do, is just replace that, have that instinct to know what the room feels like and where it wants to go. I mean, my children follow algorithms on Spotify and everything, and it's like, well, based on that, if you like that. But it's a bit like, you know, Amazon shopping. My Amazon thing says, you know, based on your purchases, you might like this, and generally it's something I've already bought. It's like another version of something I've already bought.
That's it.
But algorithms haven't got that instinct to know why certain music turns you on, and why, but also why you would need certain music at a certain time. You know, music can uplift you and it can take you down. You know, it's like, it's knowing the right record to play at the right time. Because I get that thing where people go, "Oh, you just press buttons." I go, "Yeah, that's pretty much all I do is press buttons, but you have to know which button to press at which moment."
I actually had an analogy a while ago where I thought that that with DJ culture, it took us kind of out of the post Beatles in a way, because back in the days of Tin Pan Alley, you had all these songwriters, right, sitting in their bedrooms writing songs, and their success was based on how many singers would sing their song. That was the thing, not having the big hit record. It was just, you know.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And then it became this thing of, you have all these little guys making their sort of techno and house records in their little bedrooms, and their success is down to how many DJs pick them up. So it is essentially like, it was like a new Tin Pan Alley type of culture.
That's a very interesting theory. I like that. I just actually remembered, talking about flexibility, I just remembered, Gary, that I replaced you one night. I had to replace you. Do you remember that?
No.
In Ibiza?
What happened?
You were playing in Ibiza at Ibiza Rocks.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody got poorly.
Yes. John Keeble got poorly.
Yeah, he got poorly on the day.
Yeah.
And the people who run Ibiza Rocks knew me and knew I was on holiday on the island. And they said, "Will you stand in for Spandau Ballet, like tonight?"
Oh, was the audience the same? What were the audience?
Well, that was the thing. They thought, because I was like, "Oh, can I?" And then all the people on holiday with us like, "Do you mind if I nip off and play tonight?" And we were talking about it. They're going, "Do you think they knew that you're on the island and that you're a good bloke, or was it mainly because you're the most age-dependent DJ?" And the ballet's audience really identified it.
Listen, you know, I think that when I just put something on Instagram a few days ago, and it was a clip of me in 1981 with my brother doing an interview, you know, really obviously very aggressive and pompous because I'm 21 years old and I've got stuff to say. And what I was trying to say in that interview was that, you know, we don't believe in people going to see rock gigs anymore, which is the stance we took in 1981, you know, when we were just doing a handful of shows in very odd places. What, you know, the club was the thing. And I think we were saying that then because people like Enemy and Sounds and Melody Maker didn't write about anything to do with clubs. Soul music was anathema to them, you know. So we were promoting the Soul Boy, we were promoting the Blitz Club, we were promoting the club scene. And my statement was, you know, when you go to a gig, you as someone in the audience is the least important person there. You're going to see someone else be creative. When you go to a club, there's no one else to watch. You are the creative force. Everyone is watching you on the dance floor. It's your night. It's all about you and your creative energy. So I was trying to promote what you end up
Well, you did a good job, because I am the net result of that. Without blowing too much smoke up your arse, I was a 16-year-old kid when you put out Cut a Long Story Short, and then I was reading about the Blitz, going, oh, one day I'll go to these nightclubs. And that was where I cut my teeth. There was a club in Brighton called Sherry's, which is like, what was it, Futurist night on a Wednesday night.
But it was some great names, weren't they? Sorry, I mean, just clubs had such great, some shit names.
Oh, I had a worse one. I called it Militant Funk at one point, which is really crap. But yes, no, but it was that thing. It was like I'd always grown up listening to pop music, and then when punk rock came out, it was like, oh, now I've got this. Here's my chance to start a band when I maybe haven't got the chops to do it, but it's all about the attitude. But then, what you were doing in those days of saying, like, you know, clubs are the new, you know, and this music and the 12-inch single and dance remixes really, really, really affected me, and that's the reason why I ended up a DJ rather than a bass player.
Well, I did want to say this, and then I thought it was a bit too pompous, and that maybe had nothing to do with me, or us, or our generation, who were making this.
No, you were a huge part of it. There was you know, it sort of started with Kraftwerk, and then you were the first people to say, well, look, this is something that's going on, but we can do it. You know, we can be sold.
But it's Frankenstein making his own monster and then getting eaten by it, isn't it? You know. But we'll
bat you out.
Tell you what, it's a really good spot to jump off, actually, and to, you know, you talk about going into Sherry's and all that futurist club.
Sorry, I'm just Sherry's is just too perfect. I'm just
it comes from a different time, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it comes from a different time, obviously. The futurist club.
Is that shirt drip dry, mate? No, sorry, not tonight.
But you know, who as a kid, you know, so you were obviously getting into that music, Kraftwerk, etc.
I know, but I want to go back further this, because we have one in common here, and I loved it, and this is great because you have the sort of chord that isn't really a rock record. If you look at it,
I've got hundreds of shameful records. Which one are you talking about?
It was the Osmonds, wasn't it? Which is one of the first records I ever bought.
I never actually had the record, but I do remember the moment when I fell in love with pop music. In my family, we were quite a musical family, but we just loved to sing, and my parents loved playing the Beatles and stuff like that. And I always liked the power of music. But then I saw Donny Osmond doing Crazy Horses on the telly, and he had a piano.
It was the Osmonds. It wasn't Donny Osmond. That's a very key difference.
Well, it was the Osmond, but it was specifically Donny, because he had a piano with light bulbs on it, lit up when he played it. And he had a leather jacket with his name in studs on the back. And like 9-year-old me thought, that is so cool. That's what I want to do. But in those days, I couldn't afford to actually buy the records. But that was in my head, like that was to me the coolest thing. Yeah, that's the shame, really, is that I thought Donny Osmond was the coolest person.
Yeah, I remember really battling with Crazy Horses emotionally, because, you know, I'm a bit older than you maybe, and I just felt that, you know, I knew what the Osmonds were. It's a load of crap. You know, I wasn't interested in the Osmonds. And then suddenly Crazy Horses come out, and it's like, oh, this is actually a good record. How am I meant to feel?
But you know what really sold it for me? And this was prophetic for the rest of my career. The thing that really turned me on about that record was when he had a little keyboard ribbon that went,
yeah.
That was what 9-year-old me thought that I would want.
Listen, that's you in a way, isn't it? I mean, when we get later on and we're doing, you know, your kind of big beats thing, and it's whatever you know, you're throwing stuff into tracks, noises. You can really see that track was
almost, you know, that was the origins of acid house right there.
Yes.
It's also because if you think about it, it happened to be on an Osmonds record. It could have just as easily been on a Roxy Music record. Do you know what I mean? That's sort of mad since that.
Yeah, my family wasn't cool enough that I'd be hearing Roxy Music at the age of 9. Sadly, my older brother and sisters weren't very cool. No, it's just they were on the news, I think, because they come over for a tour and everything. It was like Osmond mania.
Oh yeah, no, it was that.
But that was the moment. That was the moment when I thought, that's what I want to do for a living. You know,
did you actually pick up the bass at all? When did you become a bass player?
Bass was my last instrument. The first band I was in, I was the drummer in a new wave band, and then the singer left, so I became the lead singer. And then the next band I was in, I played guitar, and I only took up the bass to join the Housemartins.
And where is all this going on? Because the Housemartins obviously are up in Hull, but where are you?
What happened was I grew up in a place called Reigate and Red Hill, and we were just like school bands playing punk, and then
Were you at school with Keir Starmer?
I was, yeah. That's another story.
Well, that's worth telling, isn't it?
We'll come back to
Was
that.
Malcolm Doherty at school with you?
Don't think
No.
so.
Okay.
I don't think so. So yeah, and then I met Paul Heaton, who we were both at school together, and so
Paul came down to London to go to school, did he?
Sorry.
So which was Kent? We're in Reigate. I know it's very geographically
Reigate.
confusing. Your this early story.
I always have this impression that Paul is like, I'm never going further south than Birmingham.
Well, no, it wasn't his choice. His dad, he grew up in Sheffield, and his dad, for work, moved down to Surrey, and Paul absolutely hated it. And but then he was in a band that supported my band, and I really liked Paul, and I thought he wrote really good songs. So we started a band called the Stomping Pond Frogs, which was like a prototype of the Housemartins. Then we did that for a bit, and then I went down to Brighton to go to college.
It's very Springwatch. Frogs and Housemartins.
And then he moved up to Hull, but we stayed in touch. So when I finished university, their bass player left really quickly, and he knew.
What did you do at university?
I did combined humanities, like geography and sociology, in Brighton.
Very Brighton.
And he just phoned up and said, our bass player's left really quick. We've just got a record contract. You know half the songs because they're from the old band, but can you play bass? And with that, can you ride a horse thing? I went, yeah. And so I learned bass in a week. And so that was, I fell into bass playing out of that. But
did they have a record contract at that point?
They just signed a record contract, yeah. Didn't have a bass player. So I filled in originally. It was just supposed to be for the tour, but then I really enjoyed the lifestyle of driving around the country in a little comma van, playing gigs every night. And ran off and joined the circus. So I moved up to Hull from Brighton.
So it's about 1983.
This is 85.
So what else is happening in Hull? So, I mean, everything. Is this when everything but the girl were in Hull, or have they left by then?
They've been and gone.
Right.
Roland Gift and the Fine Young Cannibals are the big wigs around town. And yeah, I mean, I only moved up to join the band. I went on tour immediately. Yeah, the next 3 years were a bit of a whirlwind. My girlfriend lived in London. My record collection was still in Brighton. So I was nomadic for the next 3 years.
I'm quite surprised with Hull, aren't you, really? I mean, Hull doesn't get referenced that much, but in music, it's given quite a bit, hasn't it? I mean, obviously your Housemartins, we're talking about Everything But a Girl. And, of course, the Spiders from Mars, all came from came from Hull, didn't they? And Philip Larkin ended up in Hull.
Yeah, I mean, it's a victim of geography and circumstance.
Yeah.
Because you have to...
And the name doesn't help, does it? Let's be honest.
It's very towny versus gowny as well, isn't it? It's very sort of university to place.
There is a bit of that. I mean, it's quite cut off because you have to go, because of the Humber estuary, you have to go up to Lees and turn right. You can't go up the coast to it until they built the Humber Bridge. So it's always been felt a bit of a backwater, but like a lot of backwaters, great creativity comes out of it because that's the only way you're ever going to get out of it.
No, I think I only say that because, with, Paul and his sort of, famously, very sort of socialist lyrics and very pro North England and sort of anti-London in a way. I mean, even the title, London 0, Hull 4, it seems to be because there is a sense of outcast in a way in Hull, isn't there? That's slightly left of.
Yeah, I mean, I think he went up there. I mean, yeah, because basically what happened was we'd been playing in this band, the Pond Frogs, and we were just getting good, and we were just getting proper gigs and going up and playing in London and stuff like that. And then I'd always knew I was going to go off to the university, and then the drummer went to RADA. And so the band split up, and Paul was really cross. He was like, I thought we had something up, I thought this was important to you. And then you've gone off to be students. And I think that was when his hatred of the South really came. And he's like, I'm off. So he left Surrey and just wanted to go to the most northern, like the other end of the country physically. because he was pissed off with me and Chris in the band for.
Yeah, because I think possibly the most southern sounding sentence I've ever heard in my life you just said, which is the drummer went to Rod.
Harder, yeah. but you can see how this would have just tipped Paul over the edge.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the sort of music as well and the period, because famously on that first album, you know, it says take Jesus, take Marx, take Hope, right? And not Bob Hope guy, by the way. But
Are you sure?
Yeah.
It was Gabriel Jesus. Groucho Marx and Bob Hope. That was our little joke.
That is. I mean, possibly the most shocking name in those three. Well, out of those two is Jesus, right? It's strong, weird stuff coming to deliver itself to Top of the Pops.
Yeah, and the most shocking thing is none of us are religious. We didn't actually. It was a weird. It came out of Al Green. Basically, me and Paul loved Al Green, and if you listen to Paul singing, the Reverend Al Green. If you listen to Paul singing, he's always aped Al Green, and through Al Green, we just got into tons of gospel music, and we really loved old blues records, and gospel music was like really sort of delving for us. And we just, in the tour bus, we just got into playing sermons and things like that. And Paul would often sort of preach on stage, normally about socialism. And we just got this sort of religious gag and shaved the crosses in our heads. But it was, we didn't realise at this point we were going to be famous and people were going to hear us. And then when it sort of came to it, they were like, "Oh, and you're really religious." And we sort of looked at each other like, we were sort of kind of taking the piss.
There's nothing in the lyrics that was Christian.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I don't know. You could argue that
socialism
and Christian, and true Christianity should go hand in hand. But in terms of organised religion, none of us were actually practicing Christians. But we kind of had to keep quiet about that. We were in so much other trouble for wanting to put the royal family's heads on spikes outside Buckingham Palace. So we had enough fish to fry, upsetting people with things we said without then going. Actually, it was all a bit of a lark. The religious.
That was always, obviously you talk about the royal family and anti-royal family, and obviously that's the main song, the people who grin themselves to death. But I always wondered if that was Paul having a go at the sort of smash hits kind of way we'd all become.
Yeah. Paul will have a go at anybody, and still does, and he's so beautifully eloquent and vicious the way he does it. But I mean, all the way through, I mean, first single was called Flag Day, and that was having a go at charity. Because Paul having a go at charity because he didn't think charity that we shouldn't have charity because government should look after the poor rather than charities having to do it. The second single was called Sheep. And I mean, that was my introduction to the music business. Was the first time we ever got on telly and on the radio was a single called Sheep, and it says it's sheep we're up against, and it was about commuters who don't think for themselves, and and so we did a TV show called Number 73, and we turned up and they had sheep as part of the set and hay bales, and we turned up to rehearse the day before. We're like, "You got to get rid of the sheep and the hay bales," and they said, "Why?" We went, "Because this song isn't about sheep. It's about people behaving like sheep, and it's quite a political song." And they went, "Yeah, but it's kind of nice having sheep in it, isn't it?" So we said, "No, the sheep have got to go." And they went, "Okay." We turned up the next day live, and the sheep are still there, but they're not real sheep. They got away with the real sheep. They just had stuffed sheep, which is even worse. And that was like the Jockey Wilson moment with Dexys. It was like, oh Christ! Yeah. Welcome to the music business where things get diluted and people don't quite get what you're trying to say.
I have to tell this story, guys. So I remember, that's all right. Whenever we went to Germany to do television shows, they'd set them in beer gardens, and there'd always be some ridiculous. I mean, I remember doing a show once, and there'd be off. We didn't even know it was going on, but some guy with a clown's face was in front of a green screen, and then when we saw the video tape back, they'd taken the clown's face and they'd superimposed it on Tony Hadley's face. kind of smiling and doing crazy stuff. But I remember Boy George talking about doing things literally. I remember Boy George telling me that when he did Do You Really Want to Hurt Me in Germany, and they'd set up behind the band the interior, the theatre of a hospital, and an operation was going on, and the guy was sort of screaming on the operating table.
No, I've just going to check with one quick little one. I know, because we could actually do a whole show on just German TVs. When I was in Ice House, we had a hit single in Germany called Street Cafe. I mean, it's called Street Cafe. You want to build a set. So obviously it was a Turkish bath with a big swimming pool in the middle, full of cellophane, with dancers with Christmas trees on their heads. Anyway, carry on.
Should I just do the last one?
Yeah, go on.
I had a tune called Don't Be Good to Me, which sampled the Clash, Guns of Brixton.
Yeah.
And my copy had a slight scratch on it that I'd sampled and looped. And we sat for 2 hours in a German TV station when they were going, there's a technical problem with me. And we sat there for 2 hours, and after 2 hours, I said, what is the technical problem? They said, oh, the DAT we have for the playback it's scratched. And they just couldn't get their head around the fact that there was deliberate scratches on the record.
Oh, fantastic.
I just wondered, there was one name popped up when I was looking through it all, and it was the piano player on some of those Housemartins tracks was Pete Wingfield.
Oh, Pete Wingfield.
And I just went, oh my God, I've got to go and listen to 18 with a Bullet again. What was that like? What was he like?
He was lovely. He really sort of shaped our sound because he was into gospel as well. Yeah. And when we were saying we're quite interested in gospel music, he said he started playing sort of gospel piano. And we ended up, one of the tunes on the first album with him jamming with Paul, completely unrehearsed, just him just playing gospel chords and Paul just doing a kind of sermon, sermon over the top. And we were knocked out because I'd always liked 18 with a Bullet, and I hadn't made that. It was only when he came in the studio and we started chatting that I made the thing. But I was more excited about that he'd produced the first Dexys album.
That's right.
And all we wanted to do was story, because me and Paul absolutely loved Dexys Midnight Runners.
And he worked with Sugar Hill, didn't he? This is for the lover in you. That was him.
Great soul voice. Great soul.
Yeah. Too. That was the first time we'd ever been in like a proper professional studio. And he was the first sort of session guy that we played with who really knew their chops. But he was great. He really took us under. He taught us tons and great stories as well. Yeah.
Sorry, Guy, did you say you did an album with him?
I did an album with him with Nils Lofgren at the Manor. Yeah, for some American soap star, and it was a really weird thing. It never came out. No one got paid, and you know.
What I really loved about Pete was he was a white guy who liked black music, and that's something I've always identified with, because until the sampler and the drum machine was invented, it's like, how do white guys make music based on soul music and funk music? And Gary, you must have had this same thing. It's like, how do you do it and retain your dignity and identity? Do you put on American accents? How much do you slap the bass to pretend that it's like, and Pete absolutely loved soul music. And if you listen to 18 with a Bullet, it kind of is like like soul. And I've always had a lot of time. I've worked a lot with David Byrne. He's the same. He said you can never work out how a white guy is supposed to play black music without.
Pete did it. Pete, and I guess this is because he's nervous of doing it. He sort of did it with a slight sense of irony, a bit like a 10cc record. There was there isn't that total emotional commitment because
if you watch YouTube's been doing it on Top of the Pops, he's not comfortable.
He's not. But just actually, what you're saying, Norman, do you think this is why the records you went on to make were such, rather than being out and out kind of sort of funky dance records, were a mishmash of so many different things? It was a way of you getting rounds.
Well, that is the way that if you're scared of appropriating a culture that isn't yours, but you dearly love it, the way into it is to make it your own in some way, to add a new thing that wasn't there before. And be it Dexys, Dexys were just playing Atlantic sax soul music, but they put a Kevin Rowland's stamp on it, and you have to add something. You can't just ape it. You have to add another dimension to it. And I think you did that with the early Spandau Ballet records. That that first album, you had a kind of black groove, but you put your stamp of the pomp and the.
But this is interesting you say this. I'm just going to say, because back then, I mean, you're absolutely right. But what's interesting is back then there wasn't really the question of appropriation so much. Really, it wasn't really the thing. Like, for instance, I remember when I was young, I absolutely loved Latin music. I felt slightly weird about playing it because it was so reggae. I always felt that was our music. I grew up with that. It was in my streets. That felt like indigenous music to me.
It makes a transfer into other cultures, obviously.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, I mean, for me, the thing that opened, because at that point, I'm in the Housemartins, we were playing white English pop, because I felt that's what I should be doing, having grown up in the suburbs, you know.
The Smiths must have been a big influence as well. The Smiths was the jangle side of it, you know. That's where.
No, not well. No, I mean, the weird thing was that me and Paul were just listening to old punk records, soul records, and blues and gospel, but not wanting to just be a kind of covers band for that. No, I mean, it's weird because I was in that whole sort of indie scene around the Smiths and everything, but I felt no affinity, and I didn't especially, I wouldn't have bought Housemartins records probably if I wasn't in the band. I'd always been into funk and soul and blues.
I remember an interview, actually. I remember an interview with the Housemartins, right, in one of the music papers. And I said, while the interview's going on, they say, like, the bass player is on a pair of decks somewhere doing something completely, and it's just like absolutely baffling the journalist.
But it was always a hobby. It was just the thing I did, and I did it to pay my way through college. Working in the nightclubs in Brighton, but then all the way through the Housemartins, that was my hobby at home was decks.
So let's just try and pin some of the sort of influences together, because you're obviously we were all aware of rap music beginning and hip hop beginning in New York, and we got privileged to go to New York and see some of those club scenes, and you know, there was a backwards and forwards between what we were doing in Europe and what they were doing over there. You have Africa Bambaataa ends up, you know, mixing Kraftwerk with American beats. Suddenly, we're jumping now into the late 80s. You know, I also want to throw into the mix of inspiration and who was getting there first and adding stuff to this, which I think led to you. It was Trevor Horn with Frankie.
Yeah.
You know, some of those early 12 inches, you know, where he'd had people speaking over the records, you know, the Grace Jones tracks, you know.
Yeah, he produced Duck Rock, didn't he?
Yes.
Duck Rock, Malcolm McLaren, Duck Rock. That was.
Which we didn't realize.
One of many records.
It's still viewed as, we didn't realize it actually until we interviewed him. Doing some research, you're right. Duck Rock is seen as an absolute pioneer album, isn't it?
It is. I mean, that really turned my whole world. I mean, the first record I heard was Adventures on the Wheels of Steel, Grandmaster Flash, and then I saw Grandmaster Flash opening for the Clash, and that's when I wanted. That's when I'm like, how are you doing that? What are you doing
in America? Or?
Yeah,
was that a Union?
How come we were at Bonds? Was that a Bonds? We were at Bonds.
Bonds. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to one of the Bonds gigs.
And yeah, so but then Duck Rock, I mean, if you listen to the eclecticism of that, and it's like, if you're going to do cultural appropriation, then appropriate absolutely everything, you know. So that Malcolm McLaren turned me on to rap music with Buffalo Girls, but then that album turned me on to the idea of you can just wander around the world taking little bits, and if you take a little bit from everywhere, then it doesn't sound like you're aping one thing, because you're creating another thing in a sort of collage. And Christ knows what Malcolm McLaren would have done if he had a proper sampler in those days, was using whole loops. But yeah, no, Trevor Horn was a genius. And again, but also Trevor Horn on those dub mixes he was doing, of all the kind of early electronic stuff. That and who produced the Human League?
Martin Rushent.
Because that League Unlimited Orchestra dub album.
Yeah, that album. Yeah, that was Dave. I think a lot of that was Dave Allen, his engineer. Did a lot of that stuff.
Just tell us about the rave scene that begins, right? So I remember there's suddenly a time in the late 80s and I'm thinking, oh God, we're not the new boys anymore. You know, there's something else happening here. This was beginning. What was the music that they were dancing to that we were the kids in England were dancing to at that point? So 86, 87, you know, I suppose acid house.
Well, no, it's house. It's Chicago house, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Chicago house was, there was this underground thing. And at that point, everyone was playing Rare Groove. Rare Groove was just the thing. And in the midst of that, people started playing these sort of faster tunes. But it all followed the lineage of like disco. I mean, for me, the first house record was I Feel Love, Donna Summer. That was the first acid house record, way ahead of its time. And that had, I'll confess I wasn't there at the beginning of the racing because I was still in the Housemartins and I was living up in Hull and house didn't happen in Hull. Any kind of, I mean, I used to DJ a little bit up in Hull, but they really weren't quite, the backwater thing meant that pre-internet people just didn't know about records and ideas. And I remember just recently somebody's writing a book about street art and graffiti culture in Hull, and they got in touch with me. They said, well, because you and Paul started it because you had this book called Subway Art and you lent it to all the kids down your street and they all started painting around where you lived. That's simply because I was the only person. I'd brought it up from Brighton. I brought this book up from Brighton about the, and then but it wasn't stocked in Hull. And they didn't stock. And Gary, it's like in those days, like American imports. That was where the cool records came out.
Yeah, that's it.
They just didn't stock imports because they were too expensive, and nobody wanted them up there. So I moved back to Brighton in the end of '88, which is at the height of acid house. I moved back to Brighton. All my mates are all wearing bandanas and going, "Get on one, matey!" And I'm like, "What are you on about?" So I was sort of late to the party on the original rave scene.
It's funny that you mentioned graffiti because I'm going to offer this one up, right? Because I think what you do and what you started to do with Beats International and with sampling bits of a movie or, taking things... Actually, what I love is sometimes having two completely different keys, scales, playing on top of each other at the same time. And layering stuff over samples is a bit like the graffiti artist who takes this incredible building or any building that someone else has built and cared for and designed and then makes his mark on top of that. And then someone else makes their mark on top of that. So this collage effect. And can I be really pretentious and then talk about the way that, early 20th century art with that Picasso and Braque were doing, where it was taking collages, taking bits of multimedia and laying them on a canvas and painting around those. That's kind of what you were starting to do with music, I guess, because of the sampler.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was like, how do you make cool sounding records without aping, black music? And it was like, well, the easiest thing is just take taking the grit of a 70s funk drum loop. But it started with Beats International, but by the time I was doing Fatboy Slim records, the gag was to construct a whole pop song out of fragments of other ones. And it is, I would always call it a collage, but it was, but it's great. It was quite interesting for me because having played in a pop band, I knew how pop music, a lot of people just said, well, I'll get a loop and then I'll loop it and then we'll put something over the top. But I sort of got to the point of I would have to make the rhythm section and I'd actually be sort of playing the drums, but using somebody else's drum kit that was recorded in the 70s. And then I'd normally write the bass lines, but the rest of it, I had to find the guitar riff that fitted or try and time stretch it so it was in the right key. Like you said, not always exactly in key, but it would work.
The fact that out of key thing that would loop and come in, that's part of the hypnotic process, wasn't it? There was,
Well, there's a lot of things like that, isn't it? Where the hook is somewhere where it's not actually, where it's in a slightly different key, like, like Massive Attack are absolute masters of that. But I was saying, because there's an interesting thing with talking about Beats International, would dub be good for me? Because there's something, what if it comes all the way up to like your latest video, which is brilliant, which I hope we get to have a second on. Because there was this thing of you got into massive trouble with copyright, right? You just nabbed all these things. Had you thought about them? Okay, were you worried about the fact that you were maybe just nicking other people's stuff and maybe they should be rewarded? Or
I always thought they should be rewarded, but we didn't really. When sampling first came out, we didn't. There was no mechanism to do it. Yeah. I mean, my first foray was with the Clash, and basically, I looped up that bass line, and it was the B side of my previous single, and I went to see.
So Guns of Brixton, wasn't it?
Yeah, Guns of Brixton. Yeah. And I went to see Big Audio Dynamite, and they walked on to that tune. They played it as their walk-on music. So I was thinking, well, he's all, Mick's all right with it. So then and then because I had 2 copies of this rhythm, like a reggae rhythm, when I was DJing, my mates would like sing and rap over the top of it, and Lindy started singing "Just Be Good to Me" over it, and so I was thinking, well, that worked. So somebody probably at some point said, are you going to should we talk to the Clash about that sample? And we didn't know how big a hit it would be, but I just said, oh no, they're all right with it, because Mick played it, but came onto it, so he's heard it and he never said anything. So, but yeah, obviously when it got to number 1, then Paul Simonon, I didn't realise that Paul Simonon, that was his only writing credit.
Yes, exactly. He's got to be a bit protective of that.
And so he just came and asked for some money, but it was all right. I mean, my morals with sampling have always been, I feel I've taken their idea, then I would always try and pay for it. But if it was just a sound, I mean, if I had to clear every snare drum, every guitar chord, that I use, it's just, because that was the other thing, we discovered very quickly, was that, Paul Simonon asked for 50% of the publishing for the Guns of Brixton. Then SOS Band wanted 50% of the publishing for Just Be Good to Me. And then, what else was on there? Basically, we had claims for 170% of the publishing.
Pete Togg's told stories about something like that. Yes, you're basically in the producer's territory, aren't you?
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, so we just said to everybody, look, we can't give more than 100% of the publishing away, so you'll have to fight it out amongst yourself. But like I said, it was like the Wild West. It was like you didn't know what you can get away with. So many of us have been putting out records for 5 years, but no one really cared or worried about it because they weren't hits. And it's that old adage, with the hits come the writs. Because until then, no one really, minded or bothered. But
it's a kind of promotion.
When there's money around, then all of a sudden there's lawyers, and then over the next 10 years, it went completely the other way, where it was prohibitive. But coming back to the Collage thing, they now, then they had people who would replay what you'd sampled and make it sound actually quite spookily like the original. And they say, oh, do you want to replay that? I'm like, no. The whole point is it's the sampling of it. Because if you copy, for me, it's if you copy out something, it's a quote. Now, and if you credit it as a quote, it's a quote. If you copy it out in your own handwriting, that's plagiarism. So for me, if I left the sample as the sample, then I'm quoting somebody. But it's really easy just to make it out of samples and then get somebody to replay it. But I part of me, my record company, my management absolutely hated it, but I kind of like the thrill of the chase.
Well, I think you're a master of, Norman.
Because on every record, there would be like 10 samples, and we would clear the 2 that I thought needed to be cleared, and then we'd wing it on the other 8.
And
shouldn't have said that. There's now going to be publishers scouring your back catalogue.
Oh, they have been for years.
All right.
Fear not.
What I love with what you do is how you can take a really average sample, time stretch it, edit it, change it into something that is so iconic and so eternal and rhythmic. I mean, I'm thinking of Rockefeller Skank, with Funk Soul Brother. I know that so well. It was such a great hook. But if you go back and listen to what you sampled it from, that guy giving the little speech, Video Dogs, is it?
Vinyl Dogs, yeah.
Yeah, Vinyl Dogs.
Oh, you know your stuff.
It's nothing. It's like
he wasn't even rapping. He was just talking. That's what I love. That's the thrill of it, is to make something. I mean, I definitely in my head, coming back to the scruples of it, I definitely in my head always had a thing. I didn't want to sample something that had been a hit. already. So I remember around that time there was that Every Breath You Take rap song.
Oh yeah, Puff Daddy, yeah.
And it's like, the thing is, he just used a song that was a hit, so you knew everybody loves that tune, or Gangster's Paradise, based on Past Paradise. And I made a point of never sampling things that were hits in the first place.
We had Labby Sifri on, and Kanye had sampled him, but he basically just played the track. You know, he didn't.
Eminem was the middle eight.
But Labby Sifri hadn't been a hit, so that was all right in my book. But if you're sampling the hook line of a hit, it's like you kind of know you're kind of halfway there already. But if you sample something that wasn't a hit in the first place, so that was kind of where my morals lie. Feeling that I've done something creative, and like you said, it's a bit like the Wombles, making good use of the things that you find.
In the time we have left, Norman, I mean, two things. I mean, obviously we've got to talk about that Brighton gig, but videos, really. I mean,
exactly, yeah.
You in your relationship with Spike Jonze, because I mean, that's where your career really took off, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I was at a point where I really didn't want to make videos. And but you had to in those days. It was that you couldn't sell a record without a video.
Your songs are such a perfect perfect.
Well, we were really struggling. We were really floundering, and Spike found me. Spike actually put a VHS in my hotel room in LA, playing a gig, and it said I saw this guy dancing to your song, thought you might like it, and it was somebody doing like this crackhead dancing to Rockefeller Skank, doing like interpretive hip hop moves, annoying people, pushing people into the street. And I was just about to make the video for Rockefeller Skank, which is like a really big production of every kind of cliche in the book. And it was really expensive, and I wasn't enjoying it. And I said, why don't we just scrap this video and just have this crackhead dancing in the street? And people went, oh, it's a bit too late to do that, but you maybe got something, and you do know that Spike Jonze. And I was like, yeah. And I really liked, he did that Daft Punk video that was really irreverent.
Oh yeah.
Dog with the Broken Arm. But he'd also done Björk, It's So Quiet, which is a big production number.
Yeah.
And so I just said to Spike, look, it's too late to do Rockefeller Skank, because that was what he was dancing to. I said, but will you do my next single? And obviously Praise You was the most irreverent but successful video ever. And that was great. I mean, not only...
Just remind people of what it was.
It was just, it was 7 crackheads rather than just one.
With one shot, isn't it? Virtually just dancing in the street outside a shop.
It's an imagined community dance group.
It was the Torrance Community Dance Project, who were the deliberately bad dancers based on classical ballet and hip-hop moves, and who couldn't get themselves a gig, so they would busk in public. And so we did it in Santa Monica, outside a theatre. As the people were queuing to get in, we just set up, and the whole thing was just filmed on DV cameras. And that was our second attempt. Our first attempt, everyone ignored us. So we went to another theatre. And it was just like guerrilla filming, and really cheap to do. Initially was rejected by MTV for being substandard.
Wow.
Yeah. They
had a standard?
They refused to pay it, and the record company wanted to make a new one. And I'm like, and then just when I was fighting that battle, then VH1 viewers made it their most requested thing, and then MTV started playing, and it ended up winning like 3 MTV awards. But it was, I mean, I will love Spike Jonze until the day I die, because he saved me from hating videos to thinking we could have some fun with this shot.
I mean,
and he proved that you can just
of choice.
He proved that videos don't have to be glossy TV adverts with loads of dancing girls with big boobs. You know, it can be something stupid.
Yeah, but it sold the song as well, didn't it? Wow.
Yeah. Well, and then it broke me around the world. Not only that, but it also, so I did that with him, and then we did Weapon of Choice, and he was going out with Sofia Coppola at that point. So he got Roman to do Gangster Tripping one, where we just blew stuff up in slow motion. And after that, every video director in the world was queuing up to do a Fatboy Slim video. So I just sat there, and then all these people, you know, like Tim Pope got in touch, so I did a video with him, and I said, why did you get in touch? He said, because I was the only decent director worth of salt that hadn't done a Fatboy Slim video yet. And so yeah, he broke Fatboy Slim around the world, but also attracted the attention of other directors who wanted a piece of the action. So thank you, Spike.
I mean, Guy, how much do we love Weapon of Choice? Then?
Oh, so I mean, amazing. Always, yeah.
Were you in the room when Christopher Walken did the dancing?
No, I was supposed to be. Because that was my favourite thing was not being in the videos. Until then, like, there wasn't really a precedent that you couldn't be in your videos, and that was the greatest thing about that was not. But I always like to do a little Hitchcockian cameo. So that one, I was supposed to be doing the hoovering. I was supposed to be the bellhop doing the hoovering at the beginning. But my wife, Zoe, decided to have our firstborn son that weekend. So I had to stay in England and be there for the birth.
How did you get Christopher Walken to do that?
Spike, I don't know why Spike was having dinner with him, but he was. And he went out in the parking lot and rung me and said, I'm just having dinner with Christopher Walken and he's dropping tons of hints about getting his dancing on tape while he's still do it. Should we have him in your next video? And I just went, yep. And that was it.
Wow, that is inspiring. And so while we're on it, because I think this goes back to your early sampling of record, I'm just wondering, your new video, Role Model, right, which is great, but it's that thing of manipulation of images of absolutely everyone. So this is like total appropriation turned into something else. And is this to be cheeky in someone's trouble? Have you had to clear everything?
Yeah, do you have to go to estates, the Basquiat estate, for example?
No. Basically, AI is in the same situation, the same Wild West frontier spirit situation that sampling was when I first started doing that. We honestly don't know, so we just push it and see what we can get away with. Again, like you said, it's like, because I've done everyone, it's like hopefully no one, but in terms of taking offense, we thought we talked to a load of people and said, how do we do this? And they said, well, everybody you go to, they're either going to ask for tons of money or they're going to say no. So why don't you just publish and be damned? And basically our idea was anybody who complained, we just take them off it. And there's like 30 of them. So
what have you got in there?
That's a good point, yeah. So you got some wiggle room.
And we just hoped it would not offend or upset anyone. The only person who got in touch from that video was Simon Pegg, who went, I can't believe you got me in the video.
Who else is in the video doing the...
Oh, it's all my role models. It's Keith Haring, Basquiat, Andy Warhol, Bill Murray, Bill Hicks, David Bowie.
Yeah.
God, this like...
And how did the record come about and why now?
Pacino.
Is it leading to something else that is it another album?
No. I kind of not on my passport. It just says DJ nowadays, not DJ producer. And I kind of fell out of love with making records about 10 years ago. But after doing it for so long, thought, well, that's okay. It's like rather than inflict records on people that aren't very good because I haven't got a passion for it, why don't I just concentrate on the DJing, which I do have a passion for, and not beat myself up because I've got writer's block or because I'm not killing to make a record. For 30 years, all I thought about was making, my next tune and who am I going to produce and, and yeah, so I fell out of love with it. And now I DJing is my thing. But every now and then I make things for my DJ sets that people react to. And Role Model was one of them. I just made it just to play my DJ sets. And then everyone's going, what's that Role Model tune? I'm like, oh, it's something I made. And then my management were like, what's something we could put out? And I'm like, well, yeah, I suppose so. So it's, the same thing happened with Eat, Sleep, Rave, Repeat. It was something I made to DJ with, but everyone was like, look, you've got to put that out or someone's going to nick the idea and do it instead. So every now and then a tune that comes out of my DJing sets becomes a single, but there's no album. There's no me.
Right, your own
studio.
I see the 303 is gathering dust on the shelf behind you there.
It is. Yeah, so I'm just not. I mean, you know what it's like to make a hit record. You've got to that just got to be the whole thrust of your life. Is you've got to think about nothing else. You've got to be a workaholic. You've got to have a burning passion for it. And if it's not something you fancy doing, and I did it a lot for 30 years, and you know, now I've got kids, and
Yeah. Normal.
it really affected my output as a writer, definitely.
What did? Being a parent?
Yeah, being a parent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I thought I didn't have that power of abstract creative thought, because I always had a part of my brain was always having to be responsible.
Yeah, that's why you find yourself making records, thinking about role models.
I think that's it. I just wanted to, we mentioned it on the intro before you came, but we were talking about the 250,000 people on Brighton Beach and what that, you know, just in the brief time we've got, you know, just your memory of that day. What an astonishing thing to achieve, you know.
Yeah.
Did it take you by surprise?
Yeah. I mean, we knew that there was going to be a lot of people coming, but we didn't know there was going to be that many people coming, and we didn't. Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise that then became a very unpleasant surprise when we realised we had too many people. Yeah. I don't know, have you seen the film?
And the tide comes in and out.
Oh, right. Well, we 20 years on, we made a documentary for Sky a couple of years ago.
Gosh.
Telling the story, because basically what happened was, halfway through the afternoon, we went from elation and excitement that we had this kind of Woodstock moment to the realisation that we couldn't guarantee the safety of these people, that the police weren't going to let us do the show. The only reason I was allowed to do the show is because it would have been more dangerous not to do it, because we had all these people on the beach who'd been drinking all afternoon, and if we told them there was no show, we might have had a riot on our hands, and we definitely wouldn't have been able to control. You know, it should have been the pinnacle of my career, but it was quite edgy and, you know, fraught with, you know, just before I went on, I'd spent all afternoon talking to safety officers and policemen and squaring everything. And the last thing I said, he said, if we get this wrong, you could have 2 Hillsboroughs on your hands. Oh. And I walked on stage thinking, what's 96 times 2? Is that 180? Thinking, how am I ever going to feel the rest of my life if that many people die because of me?
Yeah. Yeah, but a cultural moment, nevertheless. What a social moment.
Cultural moment, and quite interesting if you live in the city where it happened, which I do.
I wasn't there at the time. It was really annoying.
It was every off-license owner loved me because they sold out of every ounce of alcohol in the whole city. Cab drivers still give me free rides because of the money they made that night, because they're auctioning off lifts home. And everybody who was there that night has got an experience and a story about, because it did completely gridlock the city. You couldn't get in or out. You couldn't go anywhere. People just parking in the streets. There we didn't have enough toilets. Famously, the whole city stank of piss for about 2 weeks. But yeah, so it was a big moment in pop culture. It's definitely a big moment in my home cities.
It's kind of vouch for that.
It wasn't the unmitigated triumph. It was edgy on the day, and I wish I'd just been on cloud 9 all day, but I wasn't. I was fretting.
So it's the documentary on Sky Arts if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
What's it called?
It's called Right Here, Right Now.
Well, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Norman.
That's all right. Well, thanks for being interested, and like I said, thanks for turning me on to what I do and proving that white boys who like funk can do it if they put their own flavour into it.
So nice to chat to you.
Well, I'm going to go with the fellow bass player angle, Norman. Right? That's.
He sees you more of a bass player. That's what he's.
Yeah, that's. You know,
with natural affinity, we're always the most thoughtful and responsible in any band, as you know.
There it is.
All right, mate. Have a nice day.
Nice one, cheers. Lovely.
Thanks so much, Norman. Really lovely. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, a few lessons in there as well.
A few lessons in there, Gary, and it just goes to show. You see, there's always more in common than you think.
There is. There's always nice bloke.
Really lovely guy. Yeah,
lovely guy. Intelligent. So nice. Anyway, we've got someone on very exciting next week, and
we have.
There will be a face-to-face as well.
Yeah.
Thank you to our producer Ben Jones, Gimme Sugar, and anything else?
Not really. I can't think. No, it's good night from me.
Good night from them.